Someone else. Okay, good morning, everyone. Just had an exciting meeting with a Chatan that's getting married this evening. So able to bless him and give him a few crucial points for Shlom Bayit, for living a good life, B'ezrat Hashem. So as we're talking about life stories, very quick anecdote that happened Motzei Shabbat. This past Motzei Shabbat, we had beautiful Avotu Banim here in the Beis Medrash with Rav Chanan Arel Cohen, one of our alumni of the Kollel. He's unbelievable. He attracts like honeys to bees to honey. Beis Medrash was packed, standing room only, with boys and fathers, some girls and fathers. Really exceptional. They learn like roaring Torah and excited, and very beautiful. I was able to say a few words. And I noticed as I was talking that there was one man who was a little older than the rest of us. I imagined he's a grandfather, not a father. White beard. That's what it seemed like. And sure enough, while I was giving out the snacks in the end of the program, so he comes over and he asks me if I had done a kurs of banim tzvaim, military rabbi, chaplain course in the army. So I said, long time ago, yes. So he said, I think we were together in the course. So I said, wow, how did you figure that out? So he said, I heard your name, and I put two and two together. So I asked him, sorry, just don't remember you. What's your name? He says to me, Markowitz. So I say, oh, wow, yes, I remember the name. We had two Markowitzes actually in the course. So then I figured out who it was. Sure enough, I went home and I checked it, and we have the pictures of the end of the course. So I saw him there and looked exactly like him, just black beard instead of white. It was 23 years ago that we were in the course together. Yeah. So I asked him, what is he up to? What is he up to now? He said, Mamash, a few weeks after the course, 22 years ago, he became the Chabad Shaliach. He looked like a Chabadnik rabbi. He became the Chabad Shaliach in Kiev. Rabbi Markowitz, I think his name is in the news a lot. So that's him. He was here in Beis Medrash, Motzei Shabbat. His grandson learns in Noam. He lives in Ra'anana. So I told him, wow, so you ran away? He said, yeah, sort of. He tried to eat as long as he could, and then they left. So his wife and kids are here in Israel. And then he tells me, Motzei Shabbat. He says, I'm going back this week. I said, what are you, nuts? It's like, you can't do that. It's pikuach nefesh, no matter. So he goes, but there's so many Jews stuck there, and they need me to lay in the Megillah. Who's going to lay in the Megillah for them? That's what he tells me. I said, that's unbelievable. I can't believe such a thing. I don't think it's wrong. So he said, you're right. It's could be pikuach nefesh, but they provide me an armored car to go around to all the different places. Yeah, I think so. That doesn't help when they're bombing from the sky. An armored car doesn't do anything. Well, it really doesn't work. That's the truth of the matter. But yeah, to make them feel good. You're right. I don't know. I asked him, my last question was, how's your wife with this? Did she allow you to go? So he told me if she wouldn't allow, he wouldn't go. But she's not sure. So when she's not sure, he's going. He's not sure if it's the right thing or not. I have no idea how they're really brave, these people, but sometimes they overdo it. Hopefully he'll be well. I bless him, of course. He'll be well. Yeah. The talk is that they're supposedly invading this week, Kiev. Seriously, that's what the talk is about. I know, it's crazy. That's their goal. I know. That's where they're aiming at all the time. They try to. Wow. lovely man. I started learning with his grandson and a cute kid like Ita Aleph. I don't know. Anyhow, people do their own things. First, so we go to Tefillah. What's that?
The gray beard was just a Christmas eating.
Yeah. No, he was older than us in the course already. I remember he was older than us. Yeah, no, but he has a grandchild, Kita Aleph, already. So he must be at least 10 years older than.
There's a cool story about Ukraine.
Yeah.
This is a happy one.
Yeah.
I was in Ship Days for a bat mitzvah, and there was a Ukrainian family. We sang Shavu Banim.
Wow.
But the coolest story is that their host family,
yeah,
they never met him, they just took him in. The whole Shabbat, they kept saying, you look familiar, you look familiar.
Yeah.
It turned out 6 years ago, the host family was in Kiev for a convention, and the woman, the Ukrainian woman, took pictures of him because he was wearing a kippah at the convention, and she couldn't believe a Jew would be in public and not be afraid. So she had a picture of him on her cell phone, and there's a family that took him in.
Wow. Only Hashem can organize such a thing. Wow. That's really fantastic. Wow, beautiful. Yeah, it's a happy story. Yeah. Okay, so we'll do the Tefillah course first. Yeah, we were at the very end of Birkas Hashanim, the Bracha for Parnasa and for having plentiful rain and crops every year. So we'll just do the very end of this bracha and then continue into the next. We finished the 10 Talumat Livracha. We discussed at length. Why do we mention Tal and Matar? Why do we say Matar, not Geshem, as we say in the beginning of the bracha of the Shmoneh Esrei, which went to Geshem? All that we discussed. V'sabeinu mituvah. We should have plentifulness of crops, of the good crops that grow in the land. Uvarech shnateinu kashanim atavot. And bless our years like the better years. Sometimes there are years that are drought years. We don't have rain and they're not the best situation for us. So we want every year to be blessed like the better years. Baruch atah Hashem mevarech hashani. Okay, that Hashem always blesses. By the way, each time we finish, I think we mentioned this already, each time we finish the bracha, it's always in present tense. Mevarech, not birech and not yevarech, rather mevarech hashanim. Mekabetz nidchei amo Yisrael. Shover oivi umachni ezedim. They all end off with present tense. Why is that? Because anything that happens, everything really happens all times. Meaning, even if we think that a certain year wasn't the best year for us, mevarech hashanim. For Hashem, from Hashem's point of view, and that's what we have to believe that it's true, that everything is a blessing. Even if we feel difficulties, we feel challenges. You said this many times. From Hashem's point of view, this is what's meant to be. Or mekabetz nidchei amo Yisrael. How can you say that in present tense, living 300 years ago? Where is mekabetz nidchei amo Yisrael? Yekabetz, we could understand. Or let's put it even this way. And Sheikh Knesset Agdola, who composed the wording of Shmoneh Esrei, when they were living in the beginning of Bayit Sheni period, they were looking ahead, seeing the Churban, and after Churban. They were seeing the 2,000 years of Galus, and after that, coming in with gathering back to a Jewish land, and they're already saying, "Mekabetz nidchei amo Yisrael." How does that make sense? In their days, it wasn't even Galus yet to have Kibutz Galuyot. So they should have written Yekabetz nidchei amo Yisrael. They were gone, right? They were gone. We never got them back. It could be talking about them, but even so it's Yekabetz. They were praying and hoping that those 10 tribes with that, they had no idea where they are. We still don't know where they are till today. So 2,500 years ago, There was no connection whatsoever, had no idea where they were. So it should have said Yekabetz, that we're hoping that sometime they come back. But not Mekabetz. They weren't on their way back. A few of Gad, a few of Asher, a few of Zvulun, a few of Issachar were coming back. They disappeared. So the Mekabetz seems a little awkward. And the same for every bracha. We're saying it's happening right now when it's far from occurring. So the answer is Bonei Yerushalayim. Again, today, Baruch Hashem, we're living in a period that it's really true. Bonei Yerushalayim, being built all the time, not just physically, also spiritually. We're seeing the progress of the city. But again, talking about 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, who was Bonei Yerushalayim? There were only strangers in Yerushalayim living here, no Jew kilometers away. So the answer is that no matter what period in history we were in, could be the Holocaust, could be the worst periods, it's all part of a plan. The 6,000 years of this world, that's maximum meant to exist for 6,000 years. So from day one to the last day of the Mashiach coming, it's all part of a long heavenly plan. And everything that occurs, even if we don't see it, even if we don't understand it, we can't connect it to these brachos, but they're all happening no matter what period in history. Even while there were pogroms and killings and Holocaust, that's all part of Mekabetz Nidchei Amo Yisrael. We may not see it happening, but it is happening, because by those periods of time going by, they were necessary. There's something Hashem needed to, for some reason, He needed to do it that way in order for it to be part of the process of Kibutz Galuyot. It wouldn't happen without that. So it's part of Kibutz Galuyot. Everything is, and there's always a level of Hashem's level of everything happening according to plan. And there's our level, the way we live our life, which we try to connect as much as we can and to live a life that's according to what Hashem wants us to do. We try our best to lead a life, to live a life that's according to Hashem's will. But not always are we doing the right thing, and not always are we having the correct hashkafa of what's meant and what Hashem wants of us. Not always are we in the right direction, but it doesn't matter. It's, as we said many times, it's two parallel planes that occur at once. What we decide to do or not to do, and what Hashem wants has planned for this world to develop. It's always happening in parallel planes, and no matter what we decide to do or not to do, the plan goes on. Hashem's plan goes on. He makes it work. It's unbelievable with the way this world functions, that Hashem has planned from day one, as the whole world planned out, and yet we have Bchira Chokshis to decide what to do and what not to do, and it doesn't matter, because it's going to happen anyhow. It matters for us, but not for Hashem. The plan doesn't change.
What happens in between is dependent on us. If you all would have come back in Shivat Zion and the Purim story didn't happen and everyone came back with Ezra, it wouldn't have been the same story.
The whole story would have been different. I mean,
it's not that you have to have the Holocaust on that. If we possibly did the right thing, then things could be different.
Potentially you're right. But
She'll take that.
But realistically, it had to happen that way. We don't know why, but there was a need to have these different situations had to happen in order for it to build up the way Hashem wanted to build up. We don't know why, and we have no idea, no explanation of anything that goes on. But we know that it's exactly as planned, even though potentially Rivki is right. We could have had if we would have done things differently, the whole plan could have changed, or the way it would have developed would have changed. But after all, we know that it had to be this way. That's what's. It's not something we can't fathom such a sentence. It's like the Rambam says, you can't understand the fact that Hashem knows everything, and yet we have Bechira Choshis. That's something the Rambam says a human mind can't grasp. With all the explanations they give of Hashem overseeing there's no time restriction from Hashem, by Hashem. Hashem doesn't see things as timely going one after the other. He sees things at once, like the entire 6,000 years Hashem sees at once. We need the time to see how things develop, but no matter how we explain it, we can't understand really how this works out, that He knows everything, and yet we have free will to choose what we want to do. But it works. It's true. It's not. Some say that it's really make believe. We don't really have free choice. If Hashem planned out everything, we'll decide. But that's not true. Hashem gives us 100% free will and free choice to do whatever we decide, and yet the plan is all set up in advance, and it works. So these are things beyond human capacity to understand. Okay, so that's Mevarech Hashanim. Every single year is blessed after all. Even those years that we're not feeling blessed. But He's Mevarech Hashanim no matter what. This is the proper way that this year should have developed. Okay, now we finished actually the first 6 brachos of requests, and we're going into the second set of 6 brachos of requests. As we said to begin with, that the first 6 are based on personal needs, the needs that every one of us ask for in order to have a comfortable life. Now, the next 6 brachos are national needs, the large scale, not the individual life, the national life of the Jewish people. So we're going into this next 6 brachos of requests to speak nationally. So the first national need is Kibutz Galuyot. Kabe shafar gadol lechirutenu, v'san nes lekabetz galuyotenu, v'kabetzenu yachad me'arba kanfot haaretz. Baruch atah Hashem mekabetz nidchei amo Yisrael. With gathering the Jewish people back to their homeland. A beautiful connection between Birkas Hashanim and Kibutz Galuyot is the famous Gemara in Sanhedrin Tzadik Chet 98a. Amar Rabbi Abba, and this is something very, very religious Zionist saying of Rabbi Abba. It fits very well the hashkafa that we go by, and that is Amar Rabbi Abba. ואתם, הרי ישראל, פרחם איתנו ופרחם תישאו לעמי ישראל כי קרבו לבוא, אין לך קץ מגולה מזה. There's a pasuk in Shayahu, I believe, that says that when you see the land flourishing, when you see the fruits growing from the trees, ki kervu lavo, you should know that's a sign, that's the ultimate sign. Ein lecha ketz megule mizeh. It's the ultimate sign that we're nearing Mashiach, we're nearing Geulah. And that's exactly what's happening in our days. The land is flourishing, giving beautiful fruit and vegetables and flowers, and everything is growing, blossoming beautifully in the land of Israel. And it's dafka in areas where Jews live. You see it very obvious that where Jews live, that's where the land is giving its produce and beautiful and are growing nicely. Where Arabs live, it's not because they don't try. It could also be, but it looks deserted. It looks wrecked. It's not the same beauty of the land itself. Not talking about the buildings, the homes, and all that. But what the land grows, the crops, the trees, the grass. The most famous example was Gush Katif. When we had Gush Katif, it used to be before Jews came to live there that in that area, the Arabs used to call it Ha'adama Mekulelet, in Arabic, of course, and in other words, Ha'adama, the cursed land, because they couldn't grow anything from that land there. It was all sand. And Jews came to live there, the miracle happened in front of our eyes. They started growing and things grew beautifully. They had the chamamot, the greenhouses, where they grew lettuce. That's where it all comes from, chasalat. All began there, of the non-infected lettuce, no bugs. And they had cherry tomatoes. They said they had the best cherry tomatoes ever, and they exported it all over the world. And things were growing beautifully, and they couldn't believe it.
That was innovation. That was a beautiful thing.
But it's not enough. It's not enough. You can give all the technology to someone, but the land has to want it to work. It's something that happens miraculously.
Yeah. There many times.
Uh-huh.
The guy who brought him to Israel lived there, and he grew the cherry tomatoes. We eat them all the time.
Wow.
They were delicious. But that was technology not in the ground, over the ground in Hamamot. So to say the Arabs have...
No, but even the Hamamot, it grew from the land. It didn't grow from... It's a greenhouse.
It was in pots, over the pot.
Oh, yeah, pots, mamash? External?
Uh-huh.
But I did hear...
There was no bugs.
It didn't go from the land itself? Maybe, I don't know.
So just that the Arab not being able to...
Yeah.
It doesn't sit well.
Because they don't have the technology, you're saying. It could be, yeah.
Which is still a bracha. It's still amazing.
Yeah, it's still amazing. But I definitely heard and read that there were crops that grew from the land itself where no one else could grow anything there. And now it's again deserted land and no one's growing anything. Right. So everything and not attempting to grow. Any case, without comparing even, just the fact that Eretz Israel is giving its produce so beautifully, that's the sign, says Rabbi Abba, that's the strongest sign, the most powerful sign of Geulah. So the connection between Mevarech HaShanim, the bracha of Sab'einu Mituvah, Al Pnei Adama, we're talking about Eretz Israel specifically, and then T'kabet Shofar Gadol Lechiruteinu fits perfectly. Because when we see the land flourishing, then we know that it's time for us to come back. By the way, another point, the Ramban explored the land. He was able to make it to Eretz Israel, one of the only Rishonim. We're talking about 800 years ago, 850 years ago. When he came from Spain, he was able to make it to Israel and live here a few years. He spent the last years of his life in Eretz Israel, the Ramban. Actually, I'm thinking now, interesting where if you know where he's buried. I never heard of, not the Rambam, the Ramban. I don't know of any tombstone that people visit. And he was a tremendous, tremendous Rishon. Like we base a lot of our learning on the Ramban. The Rashba, Ritva, Rabbi Yonah, they're all our students. So that's what I'm just questioning right now. This second came to my mind. Where is he buried? I have to look it up in Google. You do it right away. Where is the Ramban buried? It must be in Israel because he spent the last few years of his life living here. So
he's in Israel, we would have known.
I know. That's what I'm surprised. Yeah. The Rambam is not necessarily right. We're not necessarily true.
He's not.
Yeah, right. It's a fairy tale.
He's not there.
No,
Really?
Yeah, it may not be. We're not sure.
Oh, now we know Rachel.
Yeah. Right.
Whoever went to the Ramban, I'm going up there now. Kidron Valley.
Where, the Ramban, it says there?
Yeah. In the Arab neighborhood of Wadi al-Jaz.
Oh, wow. Oh, so it's in the area of Yerushalayim. Wadi Jaz?
Maybe that's why we don't go there. Maybe it's
It's dangerous. Yeah.
That's so interesting. It's in East Jerusalem.
East Jerusalem, yeah. Wow.
That is one. We should organize.
Yeah, they're going to have a security and elders and go visit there. Oh, man. Aha. So it's also not sure. That's the problem. They're not sure where it is. Okay. Yeah.
I went to Gerona.
Gerona is where he lived. Yeah, to begin with. In Spain. Okay. Anyhow, so I was just going to say the Ramban explored Eretz Israel and he noticed, and he writes this in his, he wrote like a little bit of an historic summary of what he found while he was touring the land. So he wrote something very interesting. He wrote, first of all, we see that the bracha of the Torah in Bechukotai, meaning that the land will be deserted while Jews aren't living in it. He says the Ramban there, it's true. It's true. It's about 800 years ago. The land is deserted. People live here, but the land itself is rocky and nothing's growing and it's not working out for them. You can't grow any crops in the land. So he wrote that it's actually true. That's what's happening. And second of all, he wrote another line, which is also amazing. He made up this phrase that we say, Kol hakadosh mechavero, charev mechavero. Kol hakadosh mechavero, charev mechavero. The holier sites in Israel are the most deserted, the most destructive, the most destroyed areas. Like back then, it must have been Har HaBayit and Hebron and Tzfat, and all the holy cities are the least settled, least grown. It could be all part of that too, right? They weren't able to take over. Yeah, could be the idea too. Right. So anyhow, so we see that really only when we came back to live here, that's when the land started yielding its crops. Everything's growing, because we have to understand it's like marriage. The Am Yisrael and the land are like two halves of a huge neshama of Knesset Yisrael, not a private neshama of husband and wife that marry each other so they become like one neshama. Here it's the extensive, inclusive neshama of Klal Yisrael, meeting the neshama of the land. Half is in Am Yisrael, half is in Eretz Yisrael, and it's as if Yasis alayich Elokaich kimsos chatan al kala, and it's all around the psukim of Am Yisrael coming back to their homeland. So that's what's happening. The moment we find each other, meet each other once again, it's also compared to a mother waiting for her children to come to return back to her. That's what we say under the chuppah. Sos tasis v'tagel ha'akara bekibutz banea letocha b'simcha. Baruch atah Hashem esameach Tzion bevanea. We're like the children of Zion coming back to their mother. That's why we say Ima Adama. There's an expression in Hebrew, Ima Adama. The land is our mother. So it's trying to relive. Imagine Akara is a woman who never had kids, but if they're away for so long, it's as if she's Akara. And now when they return back, imagine what life, what excitement and reigniting energy there is when the family unites once again. We can't even imagine the excitement and delightfulness that happens when, after years and years and years, children are away from their parents and they suddenly meet each other. We hear from the Holocaust, after years and years, if someone thought that their brother or sister or father or mother were killed, and in the end they find each other. Something like beyond imagination, the excitement. So that's what happens when we come back to the homeland. The land is happy with us here. It's almost like, it's called in Hebrew, ha'anasha, with an aleph, not an ayin, not the word punishing, but the word enoshut. It's almost to feel that an inanimate object like land is really something living. It has life in it. And that's what it is here in Israel. Rav Kook said once that when he's in Chutz La'aretz, and he was in Chutz La'aretz quite a lot in his life because he grew up in Lithuania and studied in Volozhin, and then he went back, he went there for World War I. He got stuck in London for a few years. So he says, when I'm in Chutz La'aretz, all the scenes I see are dead. I don't find anthropomorphism. What's this word, Tova? You wrote this long word. I have no idea what that means.
It's hanasha.
Oh, hanasha. Wow. Much easier to say in Hebrew than in English. What's the word in English?
Anthropomorphism.
Anthropomorphism. Okay. Okay. So anyhow, Rav Kook says that when he tours in Chutz La'aretz, he goes sightseeing and hiking. He says he sees these huge mountains and forests and waterfalls and everything, but he feels it's all dead. It's not lively. Well, actually, the Rav Nazir was in Switzerland when he met Rav Kook, so he must have been there. I think that's where they met each other. Anyway, whatever it was, and anywhere he toured, he didn't find anything alive. But he says, when I walk in Israel, I see all the mountains dancing. That's how he describes it. The mountains are dancing, rejoicing, living. I see the forest smiling. That's how he was very poetic, Rav Kook. So he described the thing very poetically, but he was also very spiritual. So he felt everything comes to life, even inanimate pieces of land like that. Okay, so that's a connection to Kabbalah Shofar Gadol. Next time, we'll dive into the actual words themselves in this bracha. I'll just whet your appetite for next time. We have to discuss what does this mean, Kabbalah Shofar Gadol Chivotenu. Is there actually going to be a blowing of a shofar when Mashiach comes? That's what we're waiting for. That's the meaning of this bracha. Why is that so important to hear the shofar blowing? Why is it called Shofar Gadol? It's just it's like a Yemenite long shofar. It's going to be blown. What's the deeper meaning of all this? This we'll do next time. And also, we'll also keep you in suspense. Try to figure out which tribe can we most connect, as we're doing for every bracha of the request, to connect them to a tribe. Which tribe most connects well to Kibutz Galuyot? That we'll do next week, B'ezrat Hashem. Okay. To the brachos session. Okay, after we've done all the different details of which bracha goes before which, both when you're having same types of a variety of different foods of the same type bracha, or you're having a variety of different brachos in front of you. Each time, which do you choose to say the bracha over, and what comes first, second, third, and so on. Now we're coming to mamash the closure of this chapter. It's mamash the last 3-4 pages. Hopefully, it should be we can finish this week. We're finishing off with Birkas Hamotzi. So Birkas Hamotzi is obviously the very first bracha. If we have a selection of foods in front of us and if we're not planning on washing and eating bread, then we eat the rest of the foods. But if we want to eat bread, we should not eat any other food before we go wash. Because bread, Hamotzi, comes first. Hamaga'ish. Hey ha is Hamotzi. And it's the most important bracha, not only because it's very specific to bread, but it's also a bracha that requires Birkas Hamazon in the end. And that makes it very important in the beginning also. Because Birkas Hamazon is the only D'oraita bracha altogether, but definitely within Birkas Hanenin, it's the only bracha D'oraita. So the fact that Hamotzi leads to Birkas Hamazon makes Hamotzi very important. That's obviously first. But we'll speak about different situations where we're allowed, at least, we don't have to, but we're allowed to eat something before a motzi, even if we're planning to have a motzi. Okay, a few exceptions to the rule we just said now. Usually, choose to wash first, say a motzi, and then eat all the other foods, but sometimes you're allowed to change the order. One very practical case, and this I was a little bit surprised at the timing that Rav Phil Malka decided to define this halacha we're going to say now. It's a very short time. He says, like, the halacha is, what happens if you're planning on eating bread, but not immediately? You decide you want to have something before. Now, when can that happen? Very frequently. At any affair, right? right? Like you're going to wash at the wedding, but now you're having a Vorspeis, the selection, the beginnings of the smorgasbord, right? There too, sometimes there's bread because they have these small toast pieces with stuff on it. But sometimes there's no bread there, or you're not planning on having bread yet. You want to sit down properly at the table. So can you then eat of the selection of food and say different brachos while you're planning on having bread later? So that's an obvious yes, because there's no connection. Every Shabbos, Kiddush, you mean? Right. So those are obvious cases that you're definitely allowed. Right. Definitely allowed, because in those cases it's far apart and it's a different location even. You're having Kiddush in shul, and you're having your meal at home. You're having the smorgasbord in a certain area of the chuppah, and then you're going into the hall and having the rest of the meal. So those are obvious situations where we definitely are allowed to say all brachos from before, and then continue to washing. Although one thing you have to be aware of, if you do that, there's a big question. We've done this thing before. Do we say a bracha achrona over the foods we ate before hamotzi? Because it's not necessarily covered by birkas hamazon because we ate them before we washed. Anything that we eat after we wash, even foods that are not included in hamotzi. For example, dessert. If we have fruit, watermelon, melon, which is hadama, ice cream, which is shehako, we're having all kinds of such desserts, and we say a bracha rishona over those desserts, even within a bread meal. So yet, birkas hamazon does cover every food we've eaten during the meal. Birkas hamazon definitely covers all foods we ate during the meal. But foods that we started eating before bread, before washing, those may not be covered by birkas hamazon. That's very complicated. What's covered and what's not covered by birkas hamazon. So I'm just throwing that to pay attention to that issue. But the idea that one is allowed to make separate brachos over the foods that they're eating because they're not yet ready for having hamotzi, that's definitely fine. But let's take a more questionable case. If you're at a restaurant, okay, and you ordered a certain food, now they start putting out some stuff before they bring out the bread. Most of the time, they bring out the bread quite immediately in the beginning. But sometimes no. Sometimes you ordered like a toast or something, and that's going to be your bread. Right now, you want to drink some water. You want to have. They have sometimes small salads. So you want to have the small salads now with some water, and wait for your order to come out. Can you make all those brachos, even though water is definitely included in the motzi and salads are definitely included in the motzi? Can you make those brachos knowing that in 5, 7, 10 minutes, the bread is going to come out and you're going to wash? You have to wait for the bread. So the answer is like this. This is where Rav Maka defines what it means that, because if you're ready to eat the meal, you can't make other brachos. It's bracha she'ena tzricha. You can't just decide, no, I want to start with the salads, even though the bread is right in front of me. I'm ready to wash, but I want to start with the salads. No, you can't do that because it's bracha she'ena tzricha. You're causing a bracha, an unnecessary bracha. Because if you just go wash first, take a bite, you don't have to eat the whole slice of bread. If you're sensitive to having a certain order of food, so you just take a bite of the bread and then have all the salads you wish, drink all the water you want, and then continue with the bread and all the rest of the meal. But you can't just decide that you want to have it before and for no good reason and say a bracha that's not necessary. No, at the beginning you take one bite, but then as the meal goes on, you eat the whole slice. What? Anytime during the meal. You can even be at the end of the meal, decide to have, that's when you're having the kazaita bread. It's not smart to do that because then you may be full and you can put in another slice of bread. But it's better to have the slice in the beginning. But even if you decide to have it in the middle of the meal, 4 minutes, anytime during the meal. as long as you haven't said Birkas Hamazon, and it covers all your. Right. Doesn't necessarily. The poskim tell you, try your best to have in the beginning, just because you may forget, or you may be too full to actually have Rikazah within 4 minutes during the meal. So better to have in the beginning, and then you're all clear and everything's fine. But if you don't, it doesn't matter really. You can have it during the meal. But not to have anything before you plan to wash. So how long does it mean that you're ready to eat your bread? That's the question. How long does that mean? At a restaurant, it may take them 7 minutes to bring out your order. You have to wait for 7 minutes and not have any of the salads they brought, those small salads they brought out, or water, drink a cup of water, because you know it's coming out. So here, Phil Malka decided, I don't know how, he doesn't base it on any other posek. That's, I guess, his feeling of what people consider immediate. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. I think you could take an educated guess, no? By your experience in restaurants. I would say it's safe enough that even, let's put it this way. You're sitting at the table, checking the menus, not even ordered yet. You haven't ordered yet. That's definitely going to take more than 5 minutes from the moment you sat down until it comes out. Because it just takes 5 minutes to decide what you want, and the whole family, everyone deciding and everything. So if at that point you want to drink some water, that's the only thing that's going to be out probably at that point. So you can drink a cup of water, no problem, because you know it's going to take more than 5 minutes to get the bread. So that's a very lenient position of what it means that don't say an extra bracha if it's not necessary because you're about to have a bread meal. What does about mean? 5 minutes. More than that, it will take more than that. You're already allowed to make all the brachos you'd like. Just again, the difficulty with this is to say a bracha achrona or not to say a bracha achrona over those foods that we ate before the bread. That's a very... Because that's also may not be necessary, because in some cases, Birkas Hamazon covers that as well. In some cases, not. So if you just decide to make a bracha achrona before you wash for the bread, it may not be correct, because you're saying a bracha she'ena tzricha, because it can be covered by the Birkas Hamazon. So you're getting into a questionable. I can quickly tell you the main rules of having to say bracha achrona over what you ate before a meal and before you wash for bread. When do you not? Quickly, I'll tell you the main rules for that. One rule that tells us that allows the Birkas Hamazon to cover what we ate before washing is a halachic connection between the two. What does that mean? If you ate something before washing that would require saying a bracha rishona within the bread meal, let's say you ate a fruit before washing, you ate a fruit. Had you eaten the fruit during the meal, you would need to say brikas barei priyaetz, because we say the fruits are not part of the meal. We say that as a set rule that unless you're having them as in a salad, like you're having some mango cut up in your vegetable salad, you don't say barei priyaetz on the mango. That's really part of the meal. But if you're having fruit in the end of the meal, like a fruit salad or a baked apple or things of that sort, then you need to say barei priyaetz. So if you had any fruit before the meal, so the barei priyaetz you had before the meal helps you cover all the fruit you're going to have during the meal, at the end of the meal. Because now you won't need to say barei priyaetz. You said it already before motz. That doesn't get interrupted by washing. The barei priyaetz or shehakol or adama or mizonos, anything you said before the bread meal, the first bracha definitely doesn't get interrupted by washing. So since it covers for you, and then you also have to have actually a fruit in the end of the meal. It's not just because potentially ha'etz would cover anything you would want to eat during that meal of fruit. You have to actually have something that requires barei priyaetz, and you won't need to say it because you'll have already said it before washing. In that case, the Birkas Hamazon does cover the fruit you had before the meal. Why? Because there's a halachic bonding, a halachic connection between the fruit you ate before the meal and the meal itself. What's the halachic connection? That it covers the fruit that you're going to have during that meal. It was covered by the fruit you had before the meal, so it connects it to the same meal. That causes the bonding, and therefore the Birkas Hamazon covers the fruit you ate before the meal. That's one case that gets covered. But let's say, for example, if you had a cucumber before the meal or a salad before the meal, say Bracha Adama, and during the meal, you're going to have salads, but salads don't need to be covered by the salad you ate before the meal because a motzi covers the salad. Well, salad is part of a motzi. You don't say Bracha Adama separately after you had bread. So the salad you had before the meal doesn't help you in any way, halachically, cover any of the foods unless you're going to have watermelon or melon in the meal, during the meal, which you would have had to say Bracha Adama over because that's not considered part of the meal. And you won't need to say it because you said Adama before the meal on a salad, so then it gets connected to the meal, and then Birkas Hamazon covers it. But if you're not going to have anything that requires Hadama within a bread meal, and you said Adama before the meal, you would need to say B'rei Nefashos over that salad because it didn't help you in any way to cover something during the meal. That's one of the rules that allow connecting or disconnecting between what you ate before the meal and what you have. And by the way, if you need to say B'rei Nefashos over a salad or a cucumber you had before the meal, and you forgot to before washing, you still say it during the meal. It doesn't matter that you washed. You still need to say B'rei Nefashos over that salad you had before the meal. And not only that, even if you've said Birkas Hamazon already, over the entire meal you had, you still need to say B'rei Nefashos over the food you ate before the meal. Because there's no connection. It's two separate eating sessions. That one requires B'rei Nefashos, and that one requires a Birkas Hamazon. No connection. So better to say it as close as possible so you don't forget. But even if you forgot and you ate the whole meal and you say Birkas Hamazon, you still need to say B'rei Nefashos because you ate a salad before washing.
What happens if you're not having the fruit during the meal?
So you need to say B'rei Nefashos, right? Even on the fruit that you had before the meal because it didn't help you actually. It has to help you actually cover something within the meal that would otherwise need a bracha. You have to actually have it.
And on that, if you don't know what you're going to do, are you better off saying the after? Yes, true. If you're not sure you're going to have some fruit at the end of the meal or not, wait till you finish the meal. If you see you're having fruit, then just rely on Birkas Hamazon. If you're not having fruit, then say B'rei Nefashos, right? Better, I think, to say before Birkas Hamazon, the B'rei Nefashos, but even after, right? That's true. Wait for the end and see if you're actually helping yourself cover something that we would have had to say the bracha beforehand. Okay, another point that connects between foods before the meal and Birkas Hamazon after the meal. Another point is types of foods that you're eating in order to whet your appetite. You're starting off with something before washing in order to whet your appetite, in order to have more appetite to eat more and more foods. Now, nowadays, we don't have so much that type of foods, but it's specially used, this situation, if you're having deliberately salty foods. Salty foods create more and more appetite for a person. So if you're having salty foods before washing, that's your intent, in order to whet your appetite and create more and more desire to eat, so that gets connected to Birkas Hamazon, even if it has no halachic connection. Then we don't go to this halachic connection between the two. We go to the fact that you started off before a motzi with some type of food that is physically connected to the meal because it helps you eat more, gives you the appetite to eat more. But that's something very rare nowadays that we do that we don't need to.
the food is delicious as is. We don't need to eat stuff that whets our appetite and prepares our stomach to eat more and more. Better not to have that habit to eat less and not create more appetite to eat more. But that's another way to connect between foods that are before the meal and foods that will be during the meal. Another situation that gets connected, foods before the meal and during the meal, is mizonos. Every mizonos that we eat before the meal, like kiddush. If we have kiddush with some cake, and then we go to wash, so for the mizonos, we never have to say alamichya after having washed and said Birkas Hamazon. Birkas Hamazon will always cover the alamichya. What's that? Yeah, but Chani is right, because we don't want you to make a alamichya. These are cases where we prefer you don't say alamichya because you're going to be covered by a motzi. If you're having mizonos before a bread meal, and then you wash, and then you have the meal, don't say alamichya. It's something that's better not to. So then it depends. So it depends. How long? Right, but it depends how long will it take you from finishing kiddush to washing. If it's something that's very close, right, within 30 minutes, that's the timing. Within 30 minutes, you're going to wash, and you don't say alamichya. And it's a bracha shenatzricha if you do. It's wrong to say, because the Birkas Hamazon covers mizonos. Why does it cover mizonos? What's that? Right, but a geffen definitely doesn't need to be said before washing. Why? Because kiddush, the mere fact that kiddush is the opening of the Suda doesn't require ala geffen pre geffen, because it's definitely part of the Suda. Yeah, right. Then you're connecting kiddush to Suda, right? With the gra and all that, right? No, only in your house, right? If the kiddush is in shul, and then you're going to walk home and wash and all that, that's a total separation. Then you should say alamichya in shul and finish with the kiddush, and then go home and wash and everything else. But if you're doing it in the house, or another situation would be if you're having a simcha in shul, so you're having kiddush, and then everyone leaves, and the close family stays in the hall to have their meal together. So you're connecting the kiddush to the meal. So it's within half an hour that you're going to sit down and wash from the last bite you took from the kiddush food. If within half an hour you're going to sit down and wash, then you don't say the bracha achrona over cake and wine that you had before. Now, why cake specifically is considered connected to the meal? It doesn't work with all that we said before. It doesn't cover halachically anything you would have to say anyhow in the meal, because you wouldn't have to say mizonos within a bread meal. And it doesn't whet your appetite, it just clogs your appetite already. You feel full already by having cake. So what's the connecting point here? The connecting point is that since cake is suffix bread, we're always not sure what defines bread exactly versus cake. So although we do know, after all, to say this is a motzi, this is alamichya, and this is a mizonos, but from the point of view of Birkas Hamazon, it's close enough, cakes are close enough to bread to be covered by Birkas Hamazon no matter what, even if it doesn't have those other requirements that connect between foods before the meal and foods after. So if you're having it quite close to a bread meal, the mizonos, do not say alamichya, wash, have your meal, and get covered by Birkas Hamazon, all that you ate before, if it's mizonos.
I used to love making brachot.
Yeah, class takes away quite a few brachos. Just one last example, a very cute one here in the book that he speaks about with being able to say a bracha rishona for foods before washing. We said if it's a 5-minute interval, that's already enough to allow you to say a bracha rishona over foods that you're going to eat before washing. So he says, what about if you're at a falafel stand and you're waiting for to be served, and you want to buy a falafel. So it depends how long the line is. If you're waiting more than 5, if you see you're going to have to wait more than 5 minutes until you get your falafel and wash for the pita and everything, then if you ask him for a few balls of falafel in the meantime as you're waiting, or chips as you're waiting, so you can say adama for the chips and shehakol for the falafel balls, even though you're preparing and having a whole falafel mana, a whole serving of falafel with the pita and everything and washing. Because if it's going to take more than 5 minutes, you don't have to hold it in and wait for the pita. You can have your falafel balls and chips beforehand. But if the line is shorter than the 5 minutes, you're going to be served the next one online, or you're the first online now, and then you decide you want to have some falafel ball, don't have it, because within 5 minutes you can wash already, so it's a bracha she'eina tzricha. Unless, I guess, if there's something very specific that drives you to have it before washing. For example, he gives you the taste. He says, taste the ball.
Potato wings.
You don't have to wash on taste.
No, if you swallow, you do. Ah, right. In the end, you're right. I had, yes. I had, this is something I was, this is something I had, right. This is something I had in my mind that, if you don't swallow, then if you do swallow, you have to say a bracha no matter what. We said, you're right. Right. You don't need to taste. Right. You're just tasting. You don't need to. Right. But I would say that's true if you're having just like a bite off of the ball, of the falafel ball. You're having because that's really just tasting. You're having a whole falafel ball, then it's more than tasting already. That's like you're eating it. So, right. If you take just a bite, so you don't need to say a bracha. But you're having a whole falafel ball. Or if it's not for tasting, if it's just to eat as you're waiting, so then you should not say a bracha, because you're about to eat it soon, to say a motzi soon. And one last point of saying a bracha before, another exception of saying a bracha before washing, very last point. If you're having something on Shabbos, okay, you want to eat on Shabbos, and say a bracha before washing, some poskim allow no matter what. On Shabbos, specifically Shabbos, some poskim allow having anything before the meal, even if you're about to wash. You're about to wash right now, you can eat anything you want before the meal to say brachos. How come? It's a bracha she'eina tzricha, you're about to wash. But because we want to reach 100 brachos a day, we're supposed to say 100 brachos per day, and on Shabbos we don't have that many brachos because of Shmoneh Esrei. We only have 7 instead of 19. So we're lacking a lot of brachos on Shabbos. So it's almost like intentionally adding brachos on Shabbos. Add brachos more than necessary. Some poskim allow. The Shla Kadosh allows this. The Magen Avram does not. He says it doesn't matter. And Shabbos doesn't make it more permissible to make a bracha she'eina tzricha. The final bottom line is that if you can get around without it and yet count 100 brachos without having to make brachos, unnecessary brachos, before sitting down for the meal just for the sake of making more brachos, then better not. But if you can't make 100 brachos, then you're allowed to rely on the Shla, who allows just on Shabbos to say deliberately a few brachos, even though you're about to wash right now, just in order to add to the brachos of the amount of brachos for Shabbos. In one case, they all allow it on Shabbat. And that is, in one case that no one allows it, and that is to deliberately cause yourself to need to say another bracha within the course of eating. How is that? Let's say you're having a snack, not hamotzi. You're having an apple Shabbos afternoon. Okay? Now, you can cause yourself to say an extra bracha birkas borei pri ha'etz during eating of the apple. How do you do that? You take the few bites of the apple with borei pri ha'etz to begin with. You step out of the house for just 1 second and come back in. You need to say another borei pri ha'etz now. So to do that on Shabbat, no one allows. Even the Shla the Shlad, it said that you're allowed to cause extra brachos in order to fill in the 100 brachos a day. He only says that if you're saying a full bracha over food just before washing, which is not necessary, but it's overeating a food that you haven't washed yet. So you're saying a bracha over that food. But after having said a bracha over a certain food and deliberately canceling the bracha in order to have to say another bracha again over that same food, that even the Shlad doesn't allow. That's really bracha. That really looks like bracha batala almost. Although it isn't, because if you did step out and came back in, so you need to say a bracha. It's not a bracha batala, but it's a total bracha she'ena tzricha. It's a total situation of causing yourself to say a bracha that's not necessary, and therefore no one accepts that. And there was another case where no one accepts. No one accepts also a situation where you say a bracha achrona, even though you haven't finished eating really. You could also cause yourself a bracha, an extra bracha. Let's say you ate half an apple, you say Borei Nefashos, and then you eat the other half. So you have to say another Borei Pratz and Borei Nefashos. That's also not allowed at all, even according to the Shla. These are cases where on the same food, you're causing yourself an extra bracha. That's not allowed at all. Only eating a certain food completely, but before washing, that's a dispute. The Shla allows, the Magen Avraham doesn't. Better if you don't do it, but if you have no choice, because otherwise you won't get 200 brachos, then you can rely on the Shla and do it that way. Okay, very good. I think we've touched just a drop to finish the chapter, and we're going to a whole new subject next week. Have a Purim Sameach, everyone. And Yeshua. Soros Tovos. Amen. Shavua Tov to everyone. Bye-bye.
Purim Sameach. Toda Rabba.
Akasha. Purim Sameach.